Hello, how you doing? It's Phil Thatch, and today I'm in downtown Chattanooga. Actually, I'm in North Chattanooga at a place called Coolidge Park, and I'm walking around with the chonk. I've got the chonk back out again. It's the 28 to 70 f2, and I'm just kind of walking around taking photographs with this crazy lens of whatever interests me. I started out making a few photos walking around this beautiful fountain that's so fun for youth and adults to get in and play when it's hot outside. It might be hot enough for me to even get in that thing later today, but I doubt I'll do it. All right, we'll start out with this photograph I made of the horse there at the fountain, and it has some spigots in its nostrils and another one in its mouth, shooting lots of water. This is an f2 shot, 1/3200th of a second at 100 ISO, 47 millimeters with the chonk, the 28-70 f2. I love the way the lion looks in the background. Out of focus, but you can still tell what it is, so that's pretty cool. Pretty happy with this shot. And here is a 16:9 crop, so I can full screen this one of the entire fountain. This is 28 millimeters f2 ISO 100 and 1/3200th of a second. A lot of fun, this little fountain at Coolidge Park. Here's another kind of fountain, a water fountain. My focus point was right here on this f2 shot at 55 millimeters, 1/3200th and 800 ISO. And that's about the only spot in the entire photo that's in focus. Even this area down here is out of focus. Kind of a dreamy shot of this fountain. There's also a carousel here, but I didn't go inside, but I did make kind of a selfie picture through the window. I was actually taking a picture of one of the horses that's not actually on the carousel, but I got a reflection of myself and some bokehfied lights in the background. This is the selfie I made through the window there at the carousel. This is 40 millimeters, 1/3200th. I should have shot it slower because my ISO is 3200 and f2. My focus point is the eye of this wooden horse, and because the reflection of the black part of the lens is there, you can see it really clearly. But up here, this part of the horse's head, you see mostly me reflecting in the window. So that's pretty neat. There's a lot of stuff inside the building you can see and a lot of stuff outside the building. Here's some chairs that were behind me where I was standing. And I love these lights that are nicely out of focus and bokehfied in the background. Just a weird window picture that I made today with the chonk. I made a photo of the John Ross Market Street Bridge that's in the background here, except for I didn't make a photo of it. I made a photo of the branches of a crepe myrtle with the bridge bokehfied in the background. Here's the photo of the John Ross Market Street Bridge bokehfied in the background of this crepe myrtle. I love the way crepe myrtles look. I think they're just beautiful, even in the wintertime when there's no foliage on them. And this is an f2 shot, 70 millimeters, 1/1250th. And let's see what it looks like full screen. Another bokeh experiment. I made a photograph of this beautiful purple flower with lots of other out of focus purple flowers in the background. Here's the shot of the beautiful magenta colored flower, an f2 shot at 70 millimeters and 1/1250th, ISO 100. Really dreamy, the background area of this shot. I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. And I went ahead and made a f2 shot, which this might have been better stopped down, but it does appear to be pretty much in focus everywhere, even wide open at f2, 1/8000th of a second, 28 millimeters, ISO 100. I made this shot of the John Ross Market Street Bridge, and then I turned to my left and made this shot with very similar settings of the Walnut Street pedestrian bridge. I made a few magnolia shots with the chonk. Now we're into the magnolia shots. I found magnolia blooms in various stages. This one is pretty far along. It's lost all of its petals, and the ends of these have turned dark. This is f2, 70 millimeters, 1/3200th and 1000 ISO. Here's one that's much less further along. All the petals are still on the flower in this 70 millimeter shot at f2, 1/1600th of a second and 125 ISO, or some people say ISO. In this stage, this one does have some brown in these areas. And this one is in a little bit earlier stage. There's no brown on this area in this one. And this is 1/4000th f2, ISO 100, 70 millimeters. Really happy with the way these shots came out. My
goal was to get this area in focus, or at least some of it, and have the entire rest of the frame dreamily out of focus, which focuses your eye more on this spot right here. And I also did a little bit of a radial gradient to put more light here and less light in the corners. So those two combine to draw your eye to the center of the frame. Here's a bloom that hasn't even opened yet, another 1/4000th of a second shot, f2. This one's 200 ISO and 70 millimeters. I like this one as well.
I came down here to the spot where people launch their kayaks and paddle boards, just under the bridge or just beyond the bridge. And I really like the roots of this tree that kind of almost come out like the legs of a spider right here. And I made another f2 chonk shot of them.
I wasn't all that thrilled with this one. I mean, I still kind of like this shot, but I really like the magnolia pictures from earlier in the video better. This one's 47 millimeters f2. It turned out okay, but I'm not crazy about it. I think this is a Thomas Jefferson quote that is graffitied onto the bottom of the bridge. I think it's supposed to say, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. But again, I'm pretty sure this is a quote of Thomas Jefferson.
Well, I am still chonking. I've come to a little park right next door to Coolidge Park called Renaissance Park, and there's a little wooded area. Made a couple of weird shots in here. You know, I thought I was in the mood for street photography, but maybe macro season is here and I brought the wrong lens. Who knows? But I'm having fun with this lens anyway.
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this is a trumpet vine that hasn't opened up yet. The trumpeting blooms haven't opened up yet. I think that's what this is. This is another f2 shot, 1/2500, 70 millimeters. It looks like 70 millimeters in f2 is my favorite way to shoot this lens. But I do like the rule of thirdsness of this and the dreamy bokeh. Just kind of beautiful. And even though not all of these are in focus, the biggest one is almost completely in focus, and this one is. And that gave enough of it clarity to where I think the shot overall looks good, even dreamily at f2. I could be completely mistaken, but I believe this beautiful flower is a moss mullein, M-U-L-L-E-I-N. At least that's what Google image search is saying. It's another shot at 70 millimeters f2, kind of in the woods now, so this one is a little darker. I only needed 1/400th of a second and 100 ISO. I love the bokehfied background. It's just absolutely beautiful, and the flower doesn't look bad either. And I used another radial gradient on this one to kind of darken the outside and let it slowly get brighter until we get to the center where the subject is.
Here's another forest composition that I thought was pretty, and I made the shot at f2 like most of my shots have been today, but I went ahead and made one at 5.6 just in case f2 wasn't the right aperture for it.
Here's my forest shot, and I did shoot this at f2 and at f5.6, and I chose the f2 version. On this one, when I'm far away from the tree that is my main subject, and it was good that this tree and this tree were almost on the exact same plane, and these two weren't far off. So they're all pretty much in focus, even at f2, but these trees in the background are out of focus a little bit, and it kind of gives you the same effect as if there was fog. It gives you some separation between your subject tree and the trees in the background. And at f5 and f5.6, there wasn't enough separation. So I chose the f2 shot. This is 56 millimeters, 1/500th, f2, and 200 ISO. All these shots are handheld, by the way.
I've been hoping to do some mushroom and fungus photography this year, and really I was planning on doing that with either the 24-105 or the 100 macro. And today I'm out with the 28-70 chonk, and I found a nice subject, so I made a quick shot of it. I think I shot it at f5.
Now this shot, I picked the f5 version because when you're closer to the subject, the background goes further out of focus. And at f5, I had a pretty good bit of the subject itself in focus. At f2, most of the fungus here growing on the side of this tree was out of focus. Just my focus point, I believe, was here, and it was only in focus in just that area. So f5 worked out much better for this one, but we still have a nice dreamy out of focus background. And I like the light coming in from the left side on this. It gives some depth to the tree, and to the fungus growing on the side of the tree. This is 50 millimeters f5, 1/125th of a second, and ISO 125.
Well, I've been walking around for a couple of hours with the chonk, and you know, people talk about, oh, it's huge, it's so big, it's huge, you won't be able to stand carrying it around. Well, I'm used to carrying around super telephotos, the old Nikon 200 to 500, the Sony 200 to 600, the Canon 200 to 800, the 800 f11, which is light as a feather, the 100 to 500. If you're used to lenses like that, this lens won't bother you at all. Now, if you're used to a nifty 50, this lens might be trouble, but it's not a problem for me at all. I'm just used to big lenses. Here at Renaissance Park, they have what I like to call a bridge to nowhere. It just kind of comes out here and stops. But when you turn around and look back down the bridge, it makes an interesting perspective shot. So I made a shot of that at, I think, f5 and also wide open at f2.
I chose the f2 version of this shot instead of the f5 version. I focused kind of in this area. As you can see, right next to the camera is out of focus, and then the scene drifts into focus right in here. This is the depth of field. Just this area right here is in focus. And then the scene drifts out of focus, and it gets more and more out of focus as it goes. And it's interesting because there's light in this area where it's in focus, and then it goes through a more wooded area that becomes darker, and then it goes out into a brighter area. And the brightest area of the frame is here, and I used a radial gradient to help with that, but it was kind of naturally about the brightest area. And it's interesting because as you're drawn to that area, it's not in focus, so it kind of gives you an uneasy feeling. What is this area way out there that I'm being drawn to? I'm pretty happy with the way this photograph turned out. 70 millimeters f2, 1/2500th, and ISO 100 of the bridge to nowhere, looking back towards somewhere. Here's a 70 millimeter shot at f2. They have some bluebird houses. As you can see, this is a bluebird house, and I really love this deterrent for predators that it has on the bottom of it. I really need something like that on mine. I think a snake got my bluebirds this year. And it's interesting also that instead of a bluebird in this house, it's a tree swallow that's come all the way from South America to nest in this box. And I'm sure whoever built this nest box is perfectly fine with a tree swallow nesting in it. This f2 shot is 1/5000th of a second and 200 ISO. And we've got basically the entire birdhouse is sharp, but the background is nicely out of focus, and the background's really not that far back from this shot. And I was glad to be able to get a shot of the bird, even using a 70 millimeter lens on a full frame body.
I came back over to Coolidge Park where I started and made one more flower photo, but I think I'm going to call it a day.
I've made this shot before. One day I was out shooting in the rain. I had my 24 to 105 on that day and the R6 Mark II. And I went ahead and reshot this. I shot this at f8 because I wanted the trees in the foreground to be in focus, and I wanted the bridge in the background to be in focus. And I think I probably like the rainy day version of this better because it had more depth. 1/125th of a second, f8, ISO 100, 31 millimeters for this shot at Coolidge Park. Another flower in my last shot of the day. This type of flower was all over the place, but most of them had the blooms falling off. And I just happened to find, right as I was about to leave, this flower that had all of the blooms still on it. So I made an f2 shot of it for some nice bokeh in the background. And I'd used a radial gradient. It already was the brightest thing in the scene, but I still used a radial gradient to darken the outside a little bit more and call your attention even more to the subject in the center. There's nothing wrong with putting your subject in the center of the frame. Sometimes I do rule of thirds, but I also have had some success making attractive compositions with the subject slap bang in the middle of the frame like this one is.
Today, it's been a blast out here today with the chonk, possibly doing photography that this lens is not designed for, but is perfectly capable of. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the thumbs up button. That helps me out a lot. If you want to see some more stuff like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye-bye from North Shore, Chattanooga, Tennessee.